Welcome everyone to the first ever webinar organized by PeaceX on the topic Peace and Progress. I'm Pavni Gupta from New Delhi, India, and I'll be representing PeaceX for this webinar. I hope you guys are doing well. And to tell you a little bit about PeaceX, the organizers, PeaceX is an international amity and peace organization that is working towards creating a more sustainable, inclusive, and responsible world. We bring together leaders, innovators, and change makers to achieve this and promote the sustainable development goals set by the United Nations. I would like to welcome all the speakers that have joined us today, and I'd like to introduce you guys to them. We have Mr. Sudesh Pokhrel, Ms. Valentina Bianco, and Ms. Nonjabula Gumede, a young global change maker in the World Policy Forum 2020, Berlin, Germany. Mr. Sudesh Pokhrel is a young leader from the Kingdom of Bhutan. He holds a Master in International Relations from the South Asian University. His interests also lie in inculcating an alternative development model for the world through happiness and well-being. This led him to spearhead the creation of the ReIimagining Society, an international youth-led organization based on well-being, which endeavors to create more inclusive, fair, and sustainable communities. Ms. Valentina Bianco is an Argentine human rights activist who is a Fulbright Scholar with a master's degree in non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and terrorism studies from the United States. She interned at the United Nations Operations and Crisis Center in 2019 and worked primarily on topics related to the Syrian war and the UN peacekeeping operations. She has actively participated in projects related to the inclusion of indigenous communities in Latin America, youth at risk, and criminalization of poverty and women in international security. Ms. Nonjabula Gumede is an emerging researcher and a social entrepreneur from South Africa. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree, majoring in political science and international relations, and an LLB from the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. She has worked and volunteered for various organizations dealing with gender-based violence, women's rights awareness, skills development, education, and diversity, including tackling topics on innovation leadership in Africa. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to be hosting you all. Coming to the topics for our webinar, our topic is peace and progress. The Sustainable Goal 16 is dedicated to the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, the provision of access to justice for all, and building effective, accountable institutions at all levels. As human beings spread out and venture Earth's diversity, the only thing which they continuously strive for is self-improvement and positive influence. For these form the very core of each and every society so as to enable it in achieving peace and progress. This is something we will be exploring in this webinar. For a smooth discussion, I'd like to go over a few rules that we should all keep in mind throughout the duration of this webinar. There is an attending sheet for the webinar in the comment section. It's pinned to the top. Please fill this out to confirm your presence. The form for this attendance will be open until 45 minutes after this webinar, so please be sure to fill this. Please note that the e-certificates will be provided within 1 week only to those people who fill this attendance sheet. The form will be available only on the chat. E-certificates will not be provided if you fail to fill the attendance sheet. So please kindly check the email that you've also received. It has all the instructions regarding this webinar. If in case you can't find it, please do make sure to check the promotional events and spam folder. Most importantly, we hope that you all have an informative and engaging time with us today. Coming to the discussion, I'd like to begin the discussion by posing a question to our panelists. And the question is, what is the relation between peace and developmental prosperity? Is one essential for the other? So I would like Mr. Sudesh to please begin with his views on this question. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Well, when it comes to peace, there is no this or that, you know. The question is quite general and quite comprehensive as well. So being a student in peace and conflict studies, as well as a firm advocate of global peace myself, to understand the relation between peace and development prosperity, first of all, one needs to deconstruct what do we understand by peace itself. So do you think that only the absence of war is peace? If so, then do you consider that there is peace at your home right now? Is there peace in your online classes that's happening right now? Is there peace in India, for an example? Is there peace in Argentina? Is there peace in South Africa? So the human tendency is that one thinks that the absence of war is peace. However, if so, again, what do you mean by violence then? Is it just chaos? The elephant that I'm trying to address in the room is that absence of war does not mean peace. Peace is a combination of negatives and positives. So negative peace is a negotiated agreement where there is absence of physical violence, absence of military intervention, for an example. Positive peace looks into peace agreements. These are things like mediations and mediators and signed contracts to foster peace mutually. However, even in the most sophisticated peace agreements, when we go back and we look into the situation of wars and many examples can be found in South Asia, even within peace agreements, the violation of peace agreements. Now, why is that? Can we agree that they do not address the root causes of the conflict? Even in a peace agreement that is negotiated and in the process of signing, there are various power dynamics in play. So power dynamics that are imposed by a greater power in the agreement or through the proxy influence of another stakeholder. The point I'm trying to get to here is that the integrating element or the connecting node between peace and development prosperity is the domain of justice. So peace without justice is not development prosperity. Peace greatly runs in parallel with the idea of justice. So to answer your question, yes, I do agree, but with a small caveat that peace which delivers justice to all the stakeholders involved is essential for development prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your views. That was truly insightful. We'd like to move on to Ms. Valentina. Would you please present your views?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be having this discussion, especially in the times that we are going through right now. I completely agree with what Sudesh has just said about peace. We have to deconstruct that notion because otherwise it's too vague. You know, what is peace? So I think is understanding peace, not just merely the absence of war, is key. To put it simply, you know, peace is equity, is justice, is a healthy environment, is feeling safe, especially if you're a minority or if you're a woman. And peace is that states where human rights for everyone are fully respected. And the other thing that I wanted to add to this discussion is that we have to deconstruct the way we understand development, because development for whom and for what? Development under whose terms? Who get to decide what development is? I'm going to bring here an example of my own background in Latin America. So development for indigenous people is a complete different thing of comparing to development as Western societies. The indigenous people of the Andes offer this alternative paradigm that in Spanish is called el buen vivir. In English, roughly translated would be the good living, which means they advocate for the harmonious coexistence with nature. It opposes to the core capitalist notion of endless accumulation, endless progress, all the time taking out resources from Earth. So this alternative paradigm calls for a decrease in economic growth or economic development. This idea of all the time increasing the GDP and so forth, and finding balance. This paradigm of live good instead of live better means that you take what you need from Earth and that's it. You are not always in this constant pursuit of more, and never-ending accumulation. So the answer is yes, peace and development are essential to one another, but we have to be very careful in the way we understand development. And so who is included in the conversation is key. We need to work harder to include the affected communities and local communities in this peace and development prosperity dialogues. I think both peace and successful development start where everyone has a seat on the table and where everyone is heard. I think there is an urgent need for the incorporation of the voices and narratives of the local community's perspective in order to vindicate their assessment of what works and what does definitely don't. So otherwise, any peace initiative or development policy is doomed to failure. And I think that this type of peace building and development approaches are a direct response to the top-down, hard security or state-centric approaches where the state or a group of people impose what peace is in a just formal agreement without the consent of the grassroots levels. And we need to be fostering this type of initiative while talking about peace and development. They definitely go hand in hand, and we cannot understand one without the other. And the other thing that I wanted to add is that they are processes that are not linear and that they go simultaneously. Sometimes we have these pushbacks, and it's not a linear process. And definitely we have to be looking at the concept of of peace in a way more deep way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your views. Valentina, if I may, I would like to ask you a question that to what extent do conflict zones reflect disruption to peace and progress?
Yes, definitely 100% a disruption of peace and progress. And also, I'm going to be here also deconstructing the word progress, because the word progress in here may have very different meanings. Again, progress is not linear. And I wanted to pose some questions to the audience too, for you who are in part of this discussion. Is progress always moving forward? Is progress always a synonym of better or a synonym of new? And is it supposed to be that we are achieving a final stage because we are making progress? Okay, to what? Are we achieving at any point a final stage where we say we are done? And if so, which are the countries that are doing that we can kind of have a model, a role model, let's say? Because I always ask, progress for whom? Progress in Latin America for indigenous communities especially is linked to colonization processes directly, in the sense that back in the days, we had to be developed in a sense to achieve that final stage that was usually, of course, copying European models. So the way we understand progress, we have to, again, to be extremely careful. And related specifically to conflict zones where bombs are being dropped and where violence is the rule, I think, which is definitely the ultimate stage of a society that has not been feeling well for a while, let's say. It directly attacks peace, prosperity, and leaves hidden scars for generations. And I think we have to be paying attention to the breeding ground that lead to that stage. The disruption to peace starts, I think, early on in different forms. Poverty is violence, hunger is violence, racism and exclusion is violence, not having where to sleep is violence, being a woman and living under perpetual fear is also violent, or being persecuted because of your belief. I think this type of violences, I'm going to speak in plural, kill people silently and sometimes in a very unnoticed way until we reach the final stage where everything collapses. So I think we have to be quite critical to answer these questions, and it definitely conflict zones affect the way people behave, affect societies in general, but most importantly, it affects generations to come in this intergenerational trauma that passes from one generation to another. Yes.
Thank you. You brought out a very interesting aspect of this topic. For my next question, I'd like to ask Sudesh, how does extremism disrupt peace?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, I'm sorry, your voice is coming a little late, so I may be delayed in response. So anyhow.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. Even this is like an open-ended question because of the fact that I think we have this question has to be reiterated because we cannot say that extremism. We can say maybe how does violent extremism disrupt peace? So and this is what normally happens. Like these are the vocabularies we fail to grab when it comes to jargons related to peace. So you see, peace is not a one-way street. It is a multi-way street with various kinds of diverse people living within the colonies and alongside that street. So these diverse people can be from the LGBT communities, from different religions and various castes and structures. By structures, I mean the minorities that are living in the colony. What I'm trying to say here is that sometimes extremism also fosters peace, but it also depends upon what type of extremism is it. So for an example, the Satyagraha movement, which was a non-violent civil disobedience act, which led to the independence of India. So here, I'm pointing out to the extremism which does not hurt others, which is an act done for a noble cause rather than a blind faith. So like the saying goes, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, and this is not uncommon to anyone. So extremism, which exercises violence to addressing issues, be it positive or negative goals, is totally unacceptable and unethical. Secondly, and this is something my mentor always used to say, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So for one group, any non-violent struggle of the other group may look like as an act of terrorism. However, for the members of the other group, he may be a freedom fighter, as he may be bravely putting up a fight against, for an example, a discriminating law of the Constitution, acts that fulfill the need of only one community or the state structure itself. The sense here is to tackle hate and violent extremism. You have to address the rights and freedom of all the people who are living on that multi-ethnic, multi-structured colony within the multi-way street that I touch upon with justice.
You're right. I think we should address it as violent extremism. That does make sense. And I would like to ask you, like, according to you, what would be the possible solutions for us to tackle this hate and this violent extremism?
If I need to think of a solution, I would first of all try to recommend policymakers to pay close attention to structural factors that are enabling this type of violence. I think I come from the security perspective. I had my master's in terrorism studies in the US, which is quite particular, to study there what they understand by terrorism. It's not monolithic, but you see sometimes a very one view, very very hegemonic in the way they understand terrorism. So we are always focusing on countering weapons, illicit trafficking, money laundering, terrorism, while rarely discussing the structural factors that lead people to engage in violence. For instance, if you analyze any terrorist group in history, they all emerge in a very specific historical context among a situation of great injustices, usually. I'm not supporting violence here, of course, but I do understand some of their demands. Some people decide to channel sadness or anger, dissatisfaction through violence, and others through social movements or running for office. We need to listen more and speak less. And I'm talking for policymakers and academicians that usually we are so-called experts, even though we have no idea of the grievances of people on the ground, people who have been having, their homes bombed, or who have someone who has lost a loved one in a bombing and everything. I think we have to try to understand structural condition way more, and the role they play in bringing the ground for radicalization and everything, not just come up all the time with solutions that are more repressive, that act after the terrorist attack happened and then just go and chase everyone and bomb everyone and everything. We have to work harder on the preventive approaches.
Thank you for sharing your views on that. Now we have Miss Nonjabula. She had connection issues earlier and she's still facing them, so she'll be talking to us via audio. Hi Nonjabula, can you hear me?
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Oh gosh, it's such an unfortunate case. I've been dealing with these complications for the past 30 minutes, but I'm glad that I finally got the opportunity to join.
Oh, we're glad to. And if you don't mind, I'd like to pose a question to you since we had begun with the discussion. So
okay, sure.
I'd like to ask you that since the topic is peace and progress, and that includes sustainable development as well. So what, in your opinion, with COVID-19 and the pandemic taking place, do you think, to what extent has this, affected our mission to achieve sustainable development by 2030? If you could share your views on that.
I think the COVID-19 pandemic is such an interesting topic for me because I had the opportunity to work on a research project relating specifically to education and how the COVID-19 has affected the education system. And I think more than anything, what it represented was, a huge gap in preparation. I think a lot of our countries were not really prepared for the COVID-19, specifically where education is concerned. But I think it also just showed us the value and the importance of digital technology during this time. When you look at education currently, you see a blended learning experience where you find both the face-to-face and the online learning experience. But I think, yeah, surely more than anything, it has helped us recognize the need to be constantly prepared for any crisis that might occur in the future.
Thank you. Sudesh, would you like to say something on this?
Yeah. So I would like to add to Nonjabulu, and this year has been a very historical year because this year marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and after the COVID pandemic, more than ever, the world needs solidarity in addressing real problems. So, however, in a way, for me, the actuality of COVID-19 is not a crisis, but an opportunity to do things right, what human beings have done wrong for so many years. Human beings are most innovative to agree on common norms on a global level only under a global shock. So even if there is something of prime importance that already exists in front of the naked eyes, they do not address it until and unless there is shock waves generated by it. But by then, most of the times, we are already too late to respond. So COVID-19 is one such development which has reiterated, and I repeat, reiterated, not made us realize, it has reiterated that we need to change the way we have developed so far by ignoring the overall global well-being of the ecosystem and the peace that relates to the ecosystem. We have so far developed by means of overexploitation and underconsumption. On the contrary, instead of affecting our mission of 2030, instead one can also argue that the moon is much more visible during the night these days. The oceans and the beaches are a lot less polluted. I would not point out specifically COVID-19 as to a hindrance in achieving our sustainable development goals. This is mainly because the hindrance was already existing through many factors such as poverty, climate change, many which are already eminent. What COVID-19 has done is that it has only brought things into light and agendas into a greater perspective. So in any case, if one ought to be specific, I think it has brought into notice the element of human well-being. It has made us realize the gap in terms of accessing health systems and response measures and educational infrastructures, like Nonjabula just explained. You can see this especially in relevance to the fragile state, where the social contract between the citizen and the state is weak, where there are serious ongoing conflicts that are impeding access to health facilities and workers, given the restrictions put in place globally by COVID-19 already. So many of the young minds, and especially students, are also deprived of the educational infrastructures as well as the skill to perform online classes. This points to a very big, a massive loophole. If we really want to achieve the 2030 SDGs, we need to replace the structure of existing educational systems. We need to make healthcare inexpensive, if possible, make it free. To reach the most vulnerable, the most affected, we need to change of development. If not, if we don't do it now, I doubt whether we will be able to achieve the SDGs by 2030. It may, shift to 2050 and so on. And further, as said by, a great person known as Frederick Williams, peace does not fare well where poverty and deprivations reign. It does not flourish where there is ignorance and lack of education and information, which basically means that the lack of education, the lack of basic income, lack of healthcare access, the lack of overall well-being also means that there is absence of peace.
Thank you, Sudesh. I think I completely agree with you when you said that COVID-19 just reiterates and makes us, it tells us about the shortcomings in our system and how serious and how important it is for us to fix these shortcomings. It's nothing that didn't exist before either. It's just that this pandemic has brought it into light. That is definitely something we should all think about. And at this point, I'd like to just tell all our participants that please drop in any questions that you'd like our panelists to answer in the chat box, and I'll be asking them these questions for you. And speaking of our participants, since the majority of our participants are youth, I think it is very important that I ask you, how can the youth play a part in promoting the fact that peace and development do indeed go hand in hand? Valentina, would you like to pitch in your views on this?
Yes, that's such a great question. I think we have to come up with a toolkits of argument while demanding our key and crucial position that we deserve in society. We don't have to wait until adulthood to really start making change, and neither occupying those position-making seats, and the parliament and within the ministry and everything. We are we are having an unprecedented number of young people as a share of the global population. The number of young people right now in the world is quite large. This is the largest number that we have had so far in history. So everything that is happening, it concerns directly to our present, of course, our future. And also, there are so many people affected by armed conflict right now that really know what violence is. And I think we, first of all those decision-making positions and policymakers need to cede some power and need to understand how to cooperate and include young people in those conversations. This means not having, for instance, the World Summit on Climate Change and having the Youth Summit 2 days before. We need to come together. The youth need to be one more actor having a seat on the table, because we need young people to represent our own needs and priorities. And this happens at every single stage, not just in the politics sphere. It's about economics, in the social organizations, in the humanitarian program cycle, in crisis, in every single aspect of social life. And also, I think the young people have the potential of breaking the cycle. You know, this investing in the youth contributes to breaking the cycles of poverty, violence, discrimination that pass from one generation to the next. And I think young people, we first of all need to incorporate that idea ourselves to understand how our potential. Once we realize, once we believe in ourselves, then we have to move forward to ask, to claim those spaces, to actually be included. Because sometimes there is this synonym of being young as a synonym of junior. That person that doesn't know much, that you have to wait, you have to get your experience. But it's not about that, because we need representation at our age. So I would advise young people to get involved, get informed about what's going on, see what you can help, and above all, don't give up. We have to pressure more. We have social media on our favor. Most of us are digital natives, which means we master technology better, our generation better than anyone else, and we are living in a technological society, technological world that every day changes so much in this sense. So I think we have to master that in our favor and claim our position in society. Find the cause that you feel the most, whether it is women, climate change, social prosperity, social development, what it is, and just claim your space there, because we bring so many opportunities for this world, especially at this time that we were talking about the pandemic and COVID, that all the normal rules of the game has been suspended. So this is the perfect time to be stepping in and saying, this is my view, this is the plane that I claim in society, and this is the present that I want and the future that I want.
Thank you, Valentina. I completely agree with you. You know, I personally believe that there's something that we can all do irrespective of our age. There's something that we all can do to change this world, and that is something that I completely agree with. Nonjabula, would you like to say something about this?
I think leadership amongst the youth is such a critical conversation in Africa. I think we are fortunate enough to be in a time where more young leaders are coming up, and positions are being, or there's a sense of restructuring in government, where young people are being allowed to be involved in these conversations surrounding policy-making processes and just the political structure as a whole. But I think one kind of mentality that I believe still exists, perhaps in Africa, I don't know if it's the same in other places around the world, but it's the idea that if it doesn't affect me personally, then it doesn't matter. I was having a conversation with two brothers yesterday I was interviewing, who are environmental activists, specifically in Africa, which is so great, because you don't find a lot of that in Africa. But the conversation we were having is just exactly that a lot of people feel that you can throw something on the ground, as long as my area is clean, you don't have the idea of, or you don't think about the implications of your actions. So I think it's a great time for young people to acquire or to understand the power surrounding knowledge. I think the world needs to recognize and include the position of youth in discussions relating to the future. So in other words, sustainability. How can we meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability for future generations to meet their needs. I think also there is such a conflicted relationship between the old and the young generation, where we feel that we are not being well represented, but the older generation feels that we are perhaps vulnerable and powerless, and in most cases entitled. So in this relationship of, or in this process of development, I think we need to look at each other as pillars instead of opposing parties, because as much as we are the future, the older generation is the past, and in order to move forward, we need to reflect. So I think it's extremely important for us to work together with the old generation and the young generation. I think that's the only way that we can really achieve sustainable development.
That's true. It's a complete combined effort, and it's not just on just the youth or just the older generation. It's all of us that together need to strive towards this. Sudesh, would you like to say something?
Yeah, that was quite interesting. I mean, it's quite interesting to hear different perspectives from different regions, especially coming from South Africa and, especially coming from Valentina. And it makes me realize that, we, as the youth, are small, but they are powerful. And, I also believe that without harnessing the potential of the youth, there will not be any positive development, as will only be, nurturing a sense of marginalization, as Nonjabula just pointed. And with that marginalization, there will be a deficit in trust. So as the youth of the future, one can be a part of various webinars such as this. PeaceX webinar, and promote peace worldwide. This capability will be limited if we are not well represented in the World Forum. So this way, even through these conversations and through these activities, even radicalization will be replaced by empowered generation of peacemakers. So youth can also act as an interaction. When such things happen, youth can also act as an interaction between UN bodies like the UN Human Rights Council and their communities, and make them aware of the beauty of living with such spontaneous diversity. So when large, like-minded young peacemakers get united, their voices are better heard. Likewise, their global call for action on peace and investment on youth will be better heard by governments, by CSOs or UN organizations or any other international organization. This will further intensify mobilization of young people in service of peace, in service of development, in service of reconciliation. So what will happen? Subsequently, it will also reverse the scenario of the world where youth are mostly, seen as a problem, like Nonjabula just touched some aspects of it. The problem on the viewpoint of the other people, the normal working people are that the youth are the problem and not part of the solution. And today, we can see that they are a big part of the solution, as we can also see them working very collectively in vulnerable zones, like for an example, conflict zones. When they are not worried about their life, and they are working for a better society, a peaceful community, and coexistence. So the international community, without the dedication of the active youth, cannot reach the local communities. The partnership has to be top down as well as bottom up from both sides to build resilience and build peace. The idea here is to integrate the youth, the young people, into the decision making of their own communities through peace building and conflict management trainings. And how can they get this? By getting involved. So this way they can, the other positive benefit is that this way they can also garner inner peace in their own communities and strengthen them in terms of building a better, better, bold and brave society. I think that has to be kept in mind.
Thank you for sharing your views, Sudesh. I think now I'd again like to encourage all our participants to keep sending in their questions to the chat box, and I'll be asking them over here. And also through our registration forms, we have received a lot of participation from people. We have over 1,300 registrations from over 70 countries all over the world. And we received a lot of questions, and I'll be asking them over here, but I'd like to also apologize if I'm not able to address all of them. There's just some of them which we can ask due to time sensitivity. So, Nonjabula, the first question is for you. This is from Komba Marka from Sierra Leone. And the question is, what is your take on sustainability in Africa? And what are the hindrances towards achieving both peace and development over there?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think there's no, if we're discussing peace and progress, we're essentially speaking about development. And I think it's important for us to understand the root causes of conflict and insecurity. So there's no development without peace, but there's also no peace without development. So I think it's a matter of us understanding the complications that we or the patterns that have existed in our environments. Africa has had various conflicts, you know, some of the major conflicts, which the Somali Civil War, the Nigerian Civil War, the Rwanda genocide, the Eritrean Ethiopian War. So there's so many different wars that we have encountered on top of having been colonized. And some of the patterns that exist from those experiences, you find political crisis, religious extremism, you find many unaddressed human grievances, internal divisions, poverty, etc., etc., and of course the need to survive. And I think in order for us to even begin to discuss peace, we really need to go to the foundation of what are the root causes of the conflict that we've experienced. So I think, yeah, that's what I could, I don't know if I've answered his question well, but I definitely think for us, in order for us to move forward, we need to kind of reflect so that we don't repeat the same mistakes that we've made in the past.
I do agree with you. Reflection and introspection are both very, very important. Our next question, or before I move on to the next question, I'd like to request all our participants to please fill in the attendance sheet that is mentioned in the comment section. Please confirm your attendance over there. Moving on to the next question, I'd like to ask Valentina, and this question is from Julius from India. And the question is, with the world becoming more aware about climate change, do you believe that our actions are making any major difference in the long run?
I would definitely say yes. I have a very optimistic vision of what's going on and about the future. But I think we have to bring these sometimes abstract concepts of climate change, bring it to the most local level to understand our own ecological footprint. For instance, if I speak to someone, hey, what's climate change, especially for people that are not into these topics, these debates, that in some societies is the majority, unfortunately. I think we have to do a way more effort in the sense of bringing how and where are we contributing at local level to this disaster. So for instance, we have to advocate for responsible consumption. For instance, we have to question where the products that we buy are coming from, what's the ecological footprint, what are our surroundings doing. For instance, in my hometown, we have a lot of deforestation, but as Nonjabula was saying, she was saying that whatever doesn't affect us personally, we don't get involved. With that mindset, we are not going to move forward, because we may not have been feeling the effects of climate change at our local level, but on the other side of the world, something big is happening. The pandemic has just shown to us that level of interconnection. So we have to be making our daily choices in a very responsible way. I do believe in the impact of local changes and then escalating at a global scale. but we have to ramp up effort because the climate change doesn't wait and the clock is ticking, unfortunately. And we need to pressure more, especially at this time that there is a lot of disruption and there is a lot of room for change and to rethink the way we are doing things. So I think also that, especially young people, we have to pressure more at the policy level to be vigilant, to be watching what they debate in Congress, how many laws they are passing regarding the protection of climate change, and everything that we can do. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention, that is, don't give up with these small changes or small actions, because in the long term these actions do have effect. And the main challenge of activism for those who like to be engaged in this field is that sometimes it's very frustrating because you are sowing the seeds for a change that you may never see and that you cannot quantify or measure. You do what you do, sometimes you see changes, but you cannot personally attach to your action. And that's very challenging because you don't see this reward, let's say. But we are definitely changing the mindset and the mentality. The takeaway is that we need to ramp up efforts because the clock is definitely ticking with climate change.
As you said, awareness is very important, and that's the first step. We all need to assume responsibility, and even though we might not get immediate rewards, it's doing something big. It's positively contributing. So moving on to our next question. This is from John Yakoko from Nigeria. Sudesh, this is for you. Peace is the best solution to the crisis, but communal crises have torn many countries apart. How can communal crises be resolved in multi-ethnic societies?
Well, for that question, I would turn back to the answer of my first question. For any multi-ethnic society, you have to be very sensitive to their tradition and their culture. Likewise, you also have to address the root causes of the conflict. If you're not willing to go on ground, and if you're not willing to talk to them, and if you're not willing to be in that position and act as a mediator, then you cannot address the conflict. You have to be a sense of trust to both the parties and then mediate between them. And how can you do that? How can you do that? I mean, the know-how is that, firstly, I think people should build bridges and not burn them. And don't just build your bridge between a singular community. Build the bridge across boundaries, across communities, across gender, across caste, across structures. By structures, I mean minorities here again. Never, 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 ever consider anyone or anything inferior to you in terms of class, creed, race, and religion. Secondly, when you're looking into multi-ethnic, communities, it is not only your people that have stakes in it. There may be people from other countries. So secondly, you need to treat migration and diaspora as a positive change. Be welcoming to diverse communities, diverse faith and ethnicities, and live harmoniously side by side. Live through a sense of shared values. Love your God, but at the same time also love your neighbor. So thirdly, protect the rights of your indigenous people and minorities. How do you do that? You have to act and you have to walk the talk as genuine custodians of the environment around you. Recognize the interdependence of humans, interdependence of humans with humans and humans with nature. And how do you derive all this in a very technical manner? So the most important point here is that you have to have a sense of adaptation to tolerance, forgiveness, and reconciliation. Always keep in mind that violence begets violence. We live in a multicultural world through democratic existence. When it comes to the question of wars, you have to stand united against it. You have to ask yourself, whose war is it? What is the war for? Are you willing to end someone's life just on the basis of an ideology that you have? And are you ready to, take on the repercussions of that? The most important factor here is that most importantly, you have to act as interfaith volunteers even in times of crisis. Have a sense of giving back. Give back to the community, not just your community, but the other communities as well. If they are going through a crisis, do community service and in the respect, in advocacy of peace. If you can't do anything else, pray for them. Even that will help, and capitalize on the power of interfaith. Lastly, I think one of the most important factors is that you have to also, in the whole process, you also have to conduct interfaith awareness raising forum. We need to love and support one another, specifically if you want a sustainable world with everlasting peace and prosperity. While you can see throughout history that our world continues to be continues to be governed by intolerant behaviors and hostile scenarios, people killing each other. So interfaith awareness is of prime importance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudesh. I think this is a very important message, not just for our participants, but like all of humanity. And I hope everyone takes this as a key takeaway from this webinar. The next question we have is from Sidra from Philippines. We have quite a lot of educators in our audience, and we received very similar questions along these lines. And I'd like to pose this to Nonjabula. Do you think the concept of sustainability can be better introduced in education?
Absolutely. And I'm saying that not because I have a background in education, but because, as I mentioned, from my experience in research specifically relating to COVID-19, you've seen such a remarkable shift in how the education system is applying itself to accommodate the changing times. And I think that's essentially what sustainability is about. It's about a sense of preparedness and being able to adapt with changing circumstances. I think another critical thing that I've learned during this period is the importance of adaptive leadership. And what adaptive leadership teaches us is having the ability to adapt to whatever changing circumstance that may come your way. So absolutely, I think the education system is a representation of perhaps one of the easiest ways that we can adapt ourselves in order to ensuring sustainability. I think where relations relating to security may be concerned could be quite challenging in different respects. I know, for example, I come from a country where, although we have so many different challenges, we have not experienced, such a high level of conflict in terms of war. We haven't experienced a genocide, haven't experienced a huge conflict, even though we have been through an apartheid regime, which was an extremely oppressive government system. So I think some sustainable development goals may be harder to attain because of just the politics of the different countries, the politics of different continents, political, social, cultural norms. But I do think that maneuvering around the education sector would be quite easy. Not easy, but less challenging than the other sustainable development goals.
Thank you, Nonjabula. Building on that question, we have another one from our audience, and please excuse me if I mispronounce anybody's name. This question is from Nurhaman Mangal, and I'd like to ask Valentina, How can we remove violence from society in which the number of educated people are low?
Yes, that's such a complicated question. I think to remove violence from society in general, we have to start at home. I do believe that change starts at the dinner table. I always say that within our own families, within our own immediate circles, especially the clubs that we go after school to do sports, at the religions institution, at the university, at school, in every single level of society. For me, it's going to be very difficult to eradicate violence if some people are still going back to sleep without having a proper home, without having what to eat, because scarcity and poverty inevitably creates violence. And I think we have to do it in every single level of society. And educators regarding this particular topic have a crucial role to play, because oftentimes I think we are mostly concerned, not just we as society, but also at the policy level, we are mostly concerned to work to empower people who are not supposed to be empowered, but we rarely work with people who have a lot of privileges. So we have to be working both ways to empower communities that have been affected and that need a tool to thrive or whatever. But we need to do a better work with working with privileged people so that they understand the system that they are reproducing. Because we have to work both with the colonizer and the people that are colonized in both ways. We both together need to change the structural system that we are currently live in. Once you realize your privileges, once you realize your background, how everything has been in your favor in your life, especially for the people that have not experienced neither violence, bombs, poverty, discrimination, exclusion, or anything, or in a minor sense, to understand that whatever is not happening to them, it doesn't mean that does not exist. If they have not been excluded, it doesn't mean that exclusion does not exist as a whole, as a system. So I think in that sense, educators have a crucial role to go deeper into those minds of students, especially the ones that are coming from privileged backgrounds.
Thank you, Valentina. Something along similar lines, we have a question from Mehek Talwar. Sudesh, I'd like to pose this to you. How can the youth who are not so educated be better involved with those who are aware of sustainability at grassroots levels? How can they work at grassroots levels?
Well, I think, I have mentioned before as well, at this point, in regards to the education system that we already have. What is wrong with our education system is that, there is a pre-planned structure, and there is a certain levels that you have to, it's like a video game that, the more you do good in one level, you just pass to another level. And, it's all about merit. It's all about competition. You cannot judge an ability. I mean, you cannot judge the ability of the fish by its ability to climb the tree. So we have to make our educational system not have a commercial approach. We have to accept alternative ways of learning to sharpen our skills and sharpen our, we have to look into what people are passionate about. If someone is passionate about peace building or passionate about reconciliation, mediation, that person should be encouraged to go out in that field. But our educational structure is not on that sense, on that level. The basic education in terms of learning basics, it is a mandatory. But when it comes to specialization, they should be given options. What is happening in today's world is that 90% of population are always aiming to be doctors and engineers, and this, that's fine. You are trying to, solve problems that's related to various demographics and, medical field, but that's not everything the world needs. So we need to have something such as phenomenon-based learning, learning from your social, political environment and applying it to your own community. the problem is not from the grassroots level. I think it is from the top down. We have to have approaches such as the concept of green school, for an example, bringing bringing nature into classrooms and bringing classrooms into nature. This will better equip the evolution of humankind to deal with problems related to peacekeeping.
Thank you, Sudesh. That's very well said. Before I move on to the next question, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Could I just touch on that a bit?
Sure,
I really, I love what Sudesh just mentioned, because in Africa currently, and in my country, the unemployment rate was already high. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, it skyrocketed. And it has nothing to do with whether you have a PhD, a master's, a degree, or a high school diploma. And I think it also just represents that not all of us are equipped, or not all of us are meant to go through the academic route. And it's so, I guess, unfortunate, because for the longest time, there has been the idea that if you are educated, then your life is set. But in my country particularly, the biggest problem has been, as much as there's a rise in the number of graduates that they are, our system of governance has not planned ahead to make sure that once people graduate, that they get an opportunity to go into the workforce. So both, whether you are educated or not, I think it's extremely important to understand that there are people who are meant to create platforms, and there are some people who are meant to join platforms. So you don't always have to be the person who creates a platform, whether you're educated, whether you're not educated. But what you need to do as an individual is to participate in the process of change. So I don't think we can ever excuse ourselves from the process of change, whether we feel that we have enough skills or not, whether we feel that we are educated enough or not. It's our world. And in order for us to preserve this beautiful world, we all need to participate in the process of change.
Thank you, Nonjabula. I think that's a very inspiring message for everyone viewing this. And I think moving on to one of our last questions for the day, Nonjabula, I'd like to ask you. This is from Angelique Sanchez. And the question is, how can you address peace, especially to those who are victims of racism?
Okay, so South Africa has a history of racism. We come from, although we received or obtained our independence in 1910, we were oppressed for another 80 plus years. And this was under the apartheid regime, which literally means apartness. And the intention for that was to separate whites from non-whites, and to ensure that even within the separation, that whites and non-whites develop separately and unequally so. And I think the way that our country was able to kind of solve this problem, because we obtained our official independence in 1994, our Freedom Day, is looking at equality and equity. I don't know if this has been a discussion at the beginning before I was able to join the session, but it's looking at the importance, the interconnectedness of equality and equity. Equality, you find the importance of every individual having the opportunity to make the most of their lives. But in equity, you look at the quality of being fair and impartial. And although both these concepts are founded on the desire to promote fairness, equality achieves this through treating everyone the same, regardless of their needs. But in equity, you achieve this through treating people differently, dependent on their needs. So going back to South Africa, we were able, in 1994, we were able to establish the ground rules. And the ground rules were that everyone deserved the same opportunities, regardless of their race, their class, their gender, their orientation. But once we were able to establish that, it was then important for us to go back and correct the wrongs of the past. So in order to do this, we made use of equity through a policy called affirmative action. And what this policy was able to do is that it recognized that there are people who have been marginalized in the past and therefore deserve a boost or a jump start. So under this policy, individuals, an individual's race, sex, religion, national origin was taken into account to increase opportunities provided to those who had been unrepresented. So when we do discuss racism, it's a huge topic. It's a topic that will probably go on for years to come. But it's a matter of us identifying the fact that there are some people who have been given better opportunities in the past, and then working towards ensuring that there is, a balance. So let's go back to equity and make sure that there's a quality of being fair and impartial in our discussions. So I think that's how I would like to close off my part of my contribution.
Thank you, Nonjabula. Would any of the other panelists like to comment on this? Sudesh?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to racism, you must have heard the saying that, black is beautiful. So we have to take that thing in our mind and in our heart that, what are those beautiful things? The beautiful things are the colors of your life. When you close your eyes, your mind is dark, and that gives a soothing effect because, it releases chemicals in your body and it allows you to have a beautiful sleep. So that is what colors represent. Don't represent colors as something prayers. Your life is beautiful because you have different shades in your life. So when it comes to racism, it's all about hate. If hate is in your blood, then it's as easy as breathing. Every day you will only be thinking that this person has done wrong, that is done wrong. I am superior than this person. I am more capable. I'm more. In whatever terms you will be making comparisons. The point is not to make comparisons. The point is to be better than what you were yesterday. In terms of dealing with different people, in terms of dealing with different shades of people. It's not that, you cannot judge anyone on the basis of color, caste, creed, or any religious affiliation. You need to respect where they come from, their beliefs, because they were born and brought up in those contexts. So what I think, and I add to Nonjabula, is that we need to inculcate a positive environment of love and environment of support to one another, especially if you are trying to have a sustainable world with a view of peace and prosperity. While our world continues to be guided by intolerance, I think it lies upon the duty of the youth to do this, because the youth are the most active, and more than 80% of world population, I think it's youth. So we have a big duty ahead of us.
Thank you, Sudesh. Our last question for the day, I'd like to pose to Valentina, and that would be, the question is from Morla Raja, and the question is, what are the measurable indicators for peace and progress? How can we measure peace and progress?
That's such a good question. I would reduce the answer to opportunities and human rights compliance, definitely. Because in a society where everyone has opportunities, where everyone can develop themselves personally speaking, and they don't have to be worrying about structural conditions, about having something to eat, where to sleep, and they can be instead focusing on personal growth or their family or projects, and with the absolute having the guarantee that their human rights are going to be, you know, in fully compliance with a decent way of living. I think that's such a good indicator. And now we have to add, of course, the right to a healthy environment, that for our generation it's going to be such a challenge to incorporate as well. And just one minor comment from the previous question regarding racism, I would like to quote Angela Davis, who has said that in a racist society it's not enough to be non-racist, we have to be actively anti-racist, meaning that everyone is needed, because we need to dismantle a whole system that is oppressing some people and is depriving some others to have these opportunities and human rights compliance. So that would be my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. Coming to the end of this discussion, one of the questions that we had received was about what is it that exactly PeaceX does in its working. So I'd just like to tell all our participants about it. So PeaceX has a team which has members from all over the world. They span countries all over, and PeaceX has two branches within it, one of which is the think tank, which is named the Vienna Sphere, and the incubation hub named the Catalyst. The think tanks are working on a solution-oriented policy research relating to the 2030 targets. And we have also begun our blog, and you guys can check it out on our social media handles. That's on our website, thepeacex.com. I'd also like to tell everyone present that PeaceX is also working on impact. We have an impact project, which is basically a literacy campaign, and we hope to work towards SDG 4, which is quality education. And for all the work that we are doing and that we hope to do in the future, we'd like to call on help from all of you people. We'd like for you to volunteer to help out and, you know, act as representatives from your own countries and work with us on our mission to achieve world peace. And for that, we have something known as DELREP. And for the same, the applications are open on our website, thepeacex.com. I request you all to please check this out, and it'll be a great opportunity, and we'd love for you to work with us, and we'd love to together achieve peace for all of us. Now, coming to the conclusion of our webinar, I'd like to thank all our panelists for taking out time from their busy schedules to be with us today and share their valuable insights. I think I speak for everyone when I say that I learned a lot from this entire webinar, and I'll be going back home thinking and introspecting about how I myself can contribute towards making this world a better place to live in for everyone, not just myself. I'd also like to thank all our participants for tuning in, and we hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did while organizing it. At this point, I'd like to request all the PeaceX members to please switch their cameras on so that we can take a group photo over here. Yes, thank you. I think we're done with the photo. Thank you so much, everyone. And we request all our participants to please check out our social media handles and our website, thepeacex.com, to get the latest information on our future events. And I'd like to thank everyone once again for making our first webinar such a huge success. Thank you so much.